Good afternoon, and welcome to this latest NASA Town Hall with Administrator Jim Bridenstine. I'm Bettina Inclon with the Office of Communications. Today, the NASA Administrator and agency leadership will be providing a workforce update on the agency's response to COVID-19 and other issues impacting the NASA workforce. We're going to be answering questions submitted by the NASA workforce through the website nasa.gov/town hall. We'll be taking those questions in the order they were ranked by the workforce, with the ones with the most answers, most upvotes being answered first. And we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. Well, joining us for this great conversation is going to be NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine, Deputy Administrator Jim Morehard, Associate Administrator Steve Jerzik, Acting Deputy Associate Administrator Kathy Magnum, Chief Human Capital Officer Jane Data, Chief Health Medical Officer Dr. J.D. Polk. Each will be providing short remarks and they'll answer your questions. Let's begin. First is Administrator Jim Bridenstine.
Well, thank you, Bettina. And I just want to start by thanking the amazing workforce here at NASA who has continued to accomplish stunning achievements even when times are tough. Everybody saw the launch of Commercial Crew with a Crew Dragon, and then of course Bob and Doug coming home safely. A lot of work went into that. We're very grateful for the teams at SpaceX and NASA who made that happen. And of course, Mars Perseverance, another stunning achievement in the midst of the pandemic. Again, we're very grateful to everybody involved in that mission as well. And we've got a lot coming up. Here in the coming months, we're going to be doing the Green Run test on the SLS core stage and getting ready to move that rocket down to the Kennedy Space Center. And of course, we have the Sentinel-6 Mike Freilich launch coming up. And of course, Crew 1 also coming up. So it's important to remember that we were able to accomplish the things we've accomplished so far because people were very careful. A lot of people were, committed to work from home, and people who were willing to work from home and who did in fact work from home enabled the people who were necessary and essential for these other missions to work safely. So we thank you, whether you're working at home or working on site. We thank you for the great work that is happening. It's important to remember that our highest priority is your safety. The highest priority of NASA is your safety. If people don't feel comfortable, make sure you're talking to your supervisor about it. We don't want anybody doing things that they don't feel comfortable doing. But I will also say that we've been able to move forward in a very meaningful and, quite frankly, amazing way when we look at what we've been able to accomplish and do it safely. So we want to continue that. When we think about the important things in front of us, remember safety is paramount, and we all need to be focused on it as we go forward. Bettina, I'm excited to get into the questions, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jim. And now we'll turn it over to Deputy Administrator Jim Morehard.
Yes, thanks, Bettina, and thanks for joining us today. When Jim asked me to try to begin the plan of a return to site plan, it really was trying to provide a solid framework for everyone so everybody could make the best decisions based on what you know about your areas, your expertise, your center, the headquarters. But it's that personal knowledge that each of us know that really is determining how we've moved forward. This return to site plan is really a living document. We've made it clear we've really got to keep a balance between the mission priorities, but your health and safety and that of your family too. And the latter really continues to be our priority. And really to make sure you can do what's best for your families and yourself, we've really tried to lay out flexible guidelines and really take into consideration the evolving situations that we're all experiencing. And, this is a dynamic plan. And, I really just keep in mind, Jim said it in detail, but our work goes on and you're really providing hope and dreams to the American public. So again, as Jim said, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We'll now turn it over to Associate Administrator Steve Jerzik.
Okay, thank you, Bettina. I also want to echo what Jim Mohart and Jim Bridenstine stated with respect to the amazing progress we have been able to make during the COVID-19 pandemic, our response while keeping everybody safe. There have been impacts to our programs and on the institutional side also. There's no doubt about it, and we've been assessing those impacts over this past 3 or 4 months. The programs that we will fall into 3 categories. The first category will be programs that have been significantly impacted and we need to re-baseline them. The second category will be programs that have impacted, but we think we can absorb the impact when the current cost and schedule reserves and baseline with some additional risk. And then programs that have been minimally impacted, things that are really kind of in early formulation, we've been able to accomplish a lot of the work remotely. But programs that were in manufacturing integration and tests were significantly impacted, particularly in March, April, and into May. The only program we have re-baselined so far has been the James Webb Space Telescope. We moved the launch readiness date for James Webb from March of 21 to October of 21, and we were able to do that within the current budget that we have. So in the coming months, we'll look at each program and each mission director and determine whether we need to replan or adjust, and we'll communicate that out as we go through that using our standard normal processes. On the institutional side, I would just say that the workload has increased on the institutional side in OCHICO and OCOM and procurement, et cetera, OGC, Office of General Counsel. I just like to say, be patient with the mission support folks. They're doing yeoman's work, not only in the normal work that they do, but in responding to COVID. And so the CARES Act funding that we receive is helping there. But we only have a certain number of people, and our workforce is really working hard to keep the mission moving forward. So thank you for that. Turn it back to you, Bettina.
Thank you, Steve. Next, Kathy Magdamar, Acting Deputy Associate Administrator. Kathy?
Thanks, Bettina. Yeah, I just want to touch a little bit more about, the great plan that Jim Morhart put together on our return to work. A lot of effort went into how do we make the decisions to move back through the stages safely while we're doing the amazing work that you just heard about. We talk about there's this 14-day trend, downward trend in the case counts and the number of people who are impacted by COVID. And that is one factor that's part of our plan. But we've learned there's many more situations with schools. Whoever thought that our children will be going back this late in the fall to virtual learning. The other thing on the data, even the 14-day downward trend, we're seeing sawtoothing, that it will be trending down, then it'll hop back up, then it'll go back down. So we're relying on our experts, our health and medical team here to help us make those decisions as we move our centers through the stages. I do want to touch base that all of our centers are at stage 3, which is mandatory telework, with exceptions for mission critical and mission essential work. And that kind of relates to travel too. We're really trying to hold the travel for mission critical. And last, I just want to touch real quick on the whole process of how centers decide. Again, it is a local decision. It's local data, local conditions. But they're working very closely with the mission directors to determine which is our mission critical work that needs to be done, and then can we do it safely. And then, of course, they let headquarters know what that work is. Where about 20% of the population is doing on-site work. However, that's not all at once. We don't have large groups of hundreds of people showing up at the centers. Typically more 5 or 10 people working on this project, dispersed from 5 or 10 people maybe working on another one at the center. So that's a quick update where we are on the return to work.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll next go to Jane Data, Chief Human Capital Officer.
Thank you, Bettina, and hi, everybody. We know how difficult this year has been, and the fact that we're still addressing COVID with schools now reopening mostly in virtual mode, we are finding ourselves in a marathon and not a sprint. But as you've heard today and many other times before, Administrator Bridenstine and agency leadership have consistently reinforced that employee health and wellness comes first. So that means that we need to provide you with information about what we're doing, like today, and provide resources to help with the impact of COVID on your personal and work lives. I hope that you can see that this leadership team really cares about you, and we are doing whatever we can to support you. We've asked our supervisors and managers to be flexible in work arrangements and listen to your needs. Special thanks to all of you who completed the recent Pulse survey. It's given us some current information about what's on your minds, and we'll be talking more about the results from that survey very soon. A lot of you have asked about the excused leave for dependent care. This is a provision that we got in March and that many of you have been using over the last months. The authorization to use this leave does expire in mid-September of this year. However, we have been in regular conversations with OPM about an extension of that leave, and we're waiting for written guidance from them. So we'll update you as soon as we have additional information, because we know it's really important to many of you. One quick request of you, when you complete your time cards, we would be grateful if you could check and make sure that it is an accurate reflection of the time that you have spent teleworking. The reason for this is that we use the time card data for understanding the patterns of on-site work for civil servants across the whole agency and how that is changing month to month. If you have any questions about coding telework, there are instructions available at our NASA People /coronavirus website. It's on the landing page to the right-hand side, so it's easy to get to that information if you need it. And thanks.
Thanks, Jane. And last but not least is our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. J.D. Polk.
Thanks, Bettina. This agency is really good at balancing risk, and a pandemic is no exception. And our folks are paramount to execute our missions, and without them being healthy and in the workforce, we don't have the missions. And so it's been a high priority for us to protect our folks. The majority of our spread has been community spread. It has not been on-site spread. The protocols that we've put in place, whether it's the masking, whether it's the industrial hygiene and the HEPA filters and the social distancing and all the things that we've placed to protect our workforce, have actually done a really good job to reduce the transmission of this virus. 95% of our cases are in the community, meaning that somebody got it outside of NASA. And that's the one thing I need to impress upon folks, is that your personal responsibility to protect yourselves and protect your fellow workers and also protect the mission doesn't just start or end at our door. And we care about you and your families, but we want to see you take those precautions seriously. We have had losses in the NASA community and our contractor workforce. We have had folks hospitalized, and we have had folks intubated. Granted, those numbers are small compared to other agencies, I think, and we've been leaning forward compared to other agencies. Very often when we hear that other agencies are benchmarking against what we're doing, and we want to stay that way. We're number one in the NASA workforce and the place to work in the federal government, and that should translate into how we view and work with this pandemic as well. Thanks, Bettina.
Thank you, JD. As I mentioned, we'll start taking questions that were submitted by our workforce. We will be taking the ones with the most upvotes first, and then trying to make sure that we get as many subjects covered during this town hall as possible. So the first question is, will 100% permanent telework become more commonplace now that many jobs have proven that they can be done completely remotely? So with the first question, we'll give it to Administrator Bridenstine first.
Well, thank you, Bettina. It's an important question, and I think the short answer is, we're looking at all the different options for how we're going to work in the future, and of course, we put together a team to help us make that assessment. So the Future of Work team is putting together some concepts and ideas that we're going to be evaluating. But certainly, I think we have all learned that a lot of work can go forward even when we're all working remotely. We're not saying it's easy. I can tell you, I know firsthand it's not always easy, but certainly there are people that in fact would really like to work more remotely, and in fact could increase their productivity by doing so. Whether you get stuck in traffic or there's a lot of different reasons why people could and should work remotely. So we're certainly not opposed to it. We just want to make sure that we're doing the right things for the right reasons in every circumstance. And so we're considering all those options. Jane, you probably have some more on this.
Yes, we are looking at the many, many implications of future of work for our workforce, including facilities and office space and how we set people up safely to work off site and how it is that we keep our teams connected and able to know each other and have the kinds of networks and relationships that are so important to getting work done. And so on and so forth. So we're enthusiastic about the team that has been put in place for this and looking forward to some of their thoughts and recommendations. So,
Jane, doesn't that include representatives from every center and mission directorate?
It does indeed. Thank you, Jim. Yes.
Thank you. Our second question comes in a similar vein. The exact question submitted is, there is mounting pressure throughout the country to quote unquote return to normal, but virus infections break records almost daily. We still don't understand why it affects people differently, and there's no vaccine or herd immunity. Will employees have the ability to telework as long as they feel the need to do so and without having to disclose private information such as health conditions or personal information such as family considerations and obligations?
Yes.
So, very direct answer for the administrator, yes. I know we answered it a lot with the first. Anyone else want to add anything else to that? Other than resounding yes. So there you have your answer from an agency leadership, yes. So our next question is, why does NASA continue to act like it's March or April when information about COVID-19 was limited? We know that this virus is virtually harmless to healthy employees, particularly younger ones. Why are we still in stage 3 and not allowed to fully return to on-site work? Many employees are suffering a great and severe mental health, professional, even physical consequences because NASA refuses to allow those who are willing and able to return to on-site work. Why are the pleas of these employees being ignored? Please allow any employee that wishes to return to on-site work as normal while allowing those that wish to continue working from home to do so. So a little bit of a different take, but I'll turn this over to Deputy Administrator Morehart and also Dr. Polk. Would love to hear your response to this.
I would just start by saying, we appreciate folks that want to get back to work. And we know that a lot of people are willing to take that risk, but there's an impact on families. There's an impact on the workforce. And this to me is really about personal accountability. And we just ask you to try to be accountable to people around you that you are engaged with each day. And this is about continuing the mission of NASA. Now, let me stop there and I'll turn it to Dr. Polk.
Yeah, first I have to address what I would call maybe some mischaracterizations in that question, that children are virtually harmless with this virus. As of August 7th, we have about 570 cases of what's called multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which is a very serious heart failure and gastrointestinal and vascular maladies that occur in children. Without a doubt, children have less mortality than adults. But I think what makes this virus different is that there's a long tail to this virus. It's not just the mortality. We're seeing a lot of clots and claudication, pulmonary embolus, or clots in the lungs, stroke, other things, people suffering with this virus for months and weeks, which make it vastly different than what we see in the flu. And so although you may be willing to take the responsibility or the risk yourself, your colleagues and the agency may not be willing to accept that risk on your behalf as well. I kind of liken it to our other safety processes. You might be willing to take the risk not to wear your goggles in the shop. You might be willing to take the personal risk of not wearing your construction helmet in a construction site, et cetera. But the agency is not willing to accept that risk, and your colleagues aren't willing to accept that risk either when your risk imparts risk to them as well. And so I think we have to look at this as a community and not as a sole individual. We're certainly very empathetic to the fact that everyone is getting very tired of being stuck at home. And trust me, I think many of us empathize with that. But we still have a ways to go on this virus, and I'm probably close to it since we've done the case tracing and we've talked to families that have been impacted, and we don't. The less I have to have that conversation with families as an emergency physician, the better.
And I would just add, certainly, Dr. Polk, those are good examples and making it personal. I would also say we need to focus on the mission. And, we just saw, Mars Perseverance launch in a spectacular way. And now we're looking forward to, in February, a landing on Mars. So the question is, if we were to keep everybody working on site at JPL, for example, as we were approaching the readiness for launching Mars Perseverance, we're actually increasing the risk of an outbreak at JPL, which in fact puts the mission essential mission, in this case, Perseverance, at risk. So from my perspective, what we're trying to do is look at what are the missions that are essential, and then how do we do everything possible to protect those missions? Because an outbreak on Perseverance would have been devastating. An outbreak on Commercial Crew would have been devastating. And those are essential for a reason. Mars and Earth are on the same side of the sun once every 26 months. We have to make sure that we don't put Perseverance back into storage. We have to protect that mission, or else it's going to be a $500 million hit to the NASA budget over the course of 2 years to store Perseverance. So those are the things that we have to balance here. Is how do we ensure the success of the missions that are essential, and then how do we, and this is where Jim Morehard's return to work plan is so valuable. How do we start moving into more less mission essential is going to go forward, but then eventually we need to get to mission critical. And how do we increase mission critical work to minimize the overall impact to the agency as we work through the pandemic? Again, I think focusing on the mission is what we all need to be thinking about day in and day out. How do we keep us moving forward on the missions that are essential?
And with that, Jim, we've got Crew 1 coming up, which we just announced for the end of October, and we're also looking for the hot firing for SLS. There's so much more. Those are just two, but there's much more to come. So keeping all of us safe and healthy is, like Jim said, it's paramount to what we're trying to do.
Thank you all for great information. Changing subjects a little bit, we have this question. It says, is NASA going to address a statement by the president that, quote, NASA was closed and dead until I got it going again? This seems very discouraging to the NASA workforce, especially in these challenging times. Administrator Bridenstine, your thoughts?
Thank you for the question. A couple of things. Just a reminder, when I came to the agency 2.5 years ago, our budget was about $19 billion. Now we're at 22 billion and change, and the budget request before the House and the Senate now is over 25 billion. That's a 25% increase in just a matter of 2 years, over a 25% increase. So I think it's perfectly appropriate that people take credit for some of these activities. I will also say that we have strong bipartisan support, and we are continuing to move forward with support from Republicans and Democrats alike. So it's amazing to me that for the first time since 1972, we have a human landing system funded right now with strong bipartisan support. And for next year, we're asking for even more money for that human landing system for the moon, to return humans to the moon, the next man and the first woman to the South Pole of the moon by 2024. We put out a budget request for that human landing system of about $3.3 billion. And the House has passed a bill that funds it at the tune of about $600 million. Now, that's not everything that we asked for, but that was before a negotiation with the Senate. So it's still amazing that the House Democrats see the value in what the president is trying to achieve, and they're in fact funding it. And I will tell you, this is what we work in headquarters. It's what we're working on every day. These goals and priorities are things that are important to the agency and important to the nation. And yes, we enjoy very much the support that we're getting from the president from a budget request perspective, and we enjoy very much the support we're getting from members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to achieve the missions that we have been given by the president. So I am excited about the fact that we have a mission to go to the moon. It's not a mission that has just received rhetoric, but it is now receiving budgets. And I can tell you the people that are on this panel know full well that it has not come easily. It's a fight every day, but we're in that fight. We're getting the resources necessary to achieve the objective. That hasn't happened in a long time, and we're grateful for all of the support.
If I can add, I've watched Jim Bridenstine through this past couple years, and I've watched him eliminate conflict everywhere we go to try to accomplish the goals of NASA. And that's how we've gotten there. And it's really, I've watched him and I applaud him for his leadership for all of us, where we're trying to eliminate the issues, whether it's, are we going to the moon? Are we going to Mars? Are we going to do Orion? Are we going to go commercial? He's taken each one of these things and made it into an asset for us. And so, again, I get the concerns people have, but things are different, and we're doing amazing things that haven't been done in many years.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim and Jim. So our next question is a little bit asking about our stages. So how much notice can employees expect before move to stage 2, where most people would expect to be back on site?
Yeah. So a couple things. We are looking, like I said, everybody is at stage 3 right now, and moving to stage 2 is going to be a long process. There's again, all the data at the centers. We're talking about nothing in the foreseeable future. And I know that's vague, so I want to reiterate, it's not like we're going to tell you on Friday, woo, we made this big decision and this whole center is going to open up on Monday. Absolutely not. We're talking about the communications are going to be plenty from us, from your centers, giving you a lot of advance notice, so that you have time to make plans and you have time to have conversations with your supervisors. So, and I want to reiterate, even at stage 2, there will be a lot of teleworking, right? It just switches from being mandatory to sort of maximum. So we're still going to pursue keeping people safe, working where they can, teleworking where they can, as we proceed through the stages.
I might add, Kathy, the guidelines are out there. They're on NASA People. You can find them there. But again, as Kathy said, it's once that criteria is tripped, then there's a planning process. Right. It's not like it's just going to happen overnight. There's going to be plenty of notice. There's going to be plenty of socialization. So I think folks will have time and be prepared as changes are made. Again, as I said before, this is very dynamic. And I just urge you all of us, to have patience. We want to do what's best for all of you, and that's our priority.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Yep.
Yeah, a good reminder that a lot of us will be teleworking for a while.
Wow.
So our next question is, anti-masker colleagues who openly post on social media, they do not follow COVID guidelines. How do we work alongside of them, knowing that they could be putting others and their families in harm's way? How will mask wearing policies be enforced on center? Jerzik, do you want to take this one?
Sure, Bettina. So first, I'd like to reiterate something that Mr. Moore and Dr. Polk said earlier, and that is personal responsibility. We have emphasized personal responsibility from the very early days of COVID, to protect yourself, to protect your family, and to protect your coworkers. And I think that that's still critical. So for example, we've said, if you're experiencing symptoms, right? If you have a fever, you're home, getting ready to go to work, have a fever greater than 100.4 or greater, please stay home. Do not come to work, and seek appropriate medical attention, and if appropriate, get tested. So that still was true back in March and still true today. Same thing for wearing a mask. Whether you're on site, whether you're off site, if you cannot guarantee, social distancing, that you can maintain 6 feet or more of separation between you and others. Need to wear a mask, and we really encourage people to exhibit that behavior off-site when they're in public, as well as on-site. Again, for the protection of you, your family, and coworkers. It protects others, you transmitting the virus. It also provides some level of protection for you. And I think it's been, as Dr. Polk said, it's been successful for us on site in that very few cases of transmission have occurred on site, and it's just because masks work. They are effective in limiting the transmission and spread of COVID and lowering the risk for everyone. With respect to on-site, we have clear guidelines for mask wearing on-site. And again, if you're in a common area in a dynamic environment like a laboratory or a test facility, and you can't guarantee 6 feet of separation and social distancing between people, you have to wear a mask. And that's enforced through our supervisors. So if someone's not complying with those guidelines, then please make appropriate supervisor or supervisors aware. And we're asking supervisors to take appropriate action to correct that behavior. Just like Dr. Polk said earlier, we would take corrective action if you were wearing a hard hat or safety glasses or the appropriate PPE for the environment. No different for masks. Only with masks, you're not only protecting yourself to some extent, you are really wearing it to protect others and look out for their health and safety and not spread the virus.
A couple of things, and I want to hear from Dr. Polk on this as well, but again, we have to think about the mission. Ultimately, you wearing a mask is what enables us to accomplish the mission. We have billions with a B, billions of American taxpayer dollars invested in these missions, and ultimately we have to make sure that they move forward, because we have very limited windows of opportunity for a lot of these missions, and anytime we have delays, it's a huge cost. And we have to make sure that we are protecting the workforce. A breakout damages NASA, and it damages our country. So I can't emphasize that enough. We need to remember we're focused on the mission, and it's important that we follow the guidelines in order to make sure we can finish the mission that we're set up to do. Dr. Polk, if you would tell us what is the data on the masks, like as far as the transmission rates and things like that.
Yeah, Jim and I talked about this, you and I talked about this earlier. There's a great article in Lancet in June that talked about the different types of masks, the N95s, the surgical, the face coverings, and in general, just any type of face covering in general reduces the transmissibility of the virus. If you think, folks get too hung up on, well, the virus is only 0.3 microns and will a face covering really stop that? You got to remember the virus sticks to each other and has water vapor from your lungs that sticks to it, has white blood cells that stick to it, that all start to make that a little bit bigger. And that face covering, even the simple face covering, prevents that forward momentum of that virus and the aerosolization further and further, and keeps it closer to you. Does it stop it 100%? No, but it drops what we call the R naught from that 3 to 5, where you could transmit it to 3 to 5 people, down to about 1, equal or less than flu. And we've seen it firsthand at NASA. Our case clusters, the 2 biggest case clusters that we've had have been people not following mask protocol. In fact, we just had one last week with a tenant at a NASA center where they were not following mask protocol. And now we've got a very large case cluster, and we have to go have a large portion of people do self-isolation for 14 days. And those folks are very nervous. They're wondering when they should go get tested and et cetera. But the data's there for us. I mean, what we see in our case tracing mirrors what they saw in the Lancet article, which is a transmission drop in face coverings and masks and social distancing by up to 62%. And so it really does make a difference. And is it absolute? We can quibble over the micron of the N95 and the KN95 and et cetera. the bottom line is it does decrease the transmissibility of the virus. And so we implore people to follow that protocol as best as possible. And not only at site, but off site if they can. It doesn't help our mission if you go to a picnic with 30 people where nobody's wearing a mask, and then you come to work and break out in a fever at 3 o'clock. So those are the things that we've been seeing on site, Jim.
Thank you all. Here's another question that I connect with as a mother of two, as one of them is trying to use the scooter in the living room as I do this town hall. Can you please discuss the long-term plan to support those employees who are juggling having school children at home with many schools all virtual? We are grateful that that extended leave is still an option for many who are struggling with the extremely heavy workload and this additional burden. Jim, I know you are
Sure.
also a parent and understand this struggle.
Yeah, I know. And Bettina, Bettina and I are on the phone in these conference calls frequently, and lots of interruptions. Yeah, so when we think about that struggle, and look, I get it. I've got 3 children at home, 14, 12, and 8. I've got a mother-in-law who has multiple sclerosis, and of course I've got a wife. I have 2 dogs as well. And so NASA headquarters is right smack dab in the middle of my living room. And the challenge is my kids are getting ready to go back to school. They were planning to literally go back to school. A few days ago, that all changed. Now they're taking it 2 weeks at a time. So they're going to start school remotely. And then 2 weeks later, we're going to find out whether or not we're going to stay remote. And then we're going to go that 2 weeks at a time. Now, when we do go back to school in Oklahoma, they're talking about spreading the kids out. So some kids are going to go to school at maybe 7:30 in the morning. Other kids are going to go to school afternoon. And of course, that creates a whole another nightmare of how do you organize your personal schedule around all these other different schedules as schools are trying to manage social distancing and things like this. This is a struggle that we're having in the Bridenstine household. And of course, we are very sensitive to it because if my kids were to get coronavirus, I think they'd come through it just fine. My worry is that we've got a mother-in-law with multiple sclerosis in my house in a wheelchair who's not in great health. She's in her 70s. And we don't want our kids bringing something home to Nana. That's what we're afraid of. And so this is, it's a tough call that we're going to have to make. How are we going to manage this going forward in our household? But I will also say, we're not unique. I know there are families all across NASA in exactly the same position, if not even more challenging positions. So we're going to have to figure out how to work through it. I know, Jane, you've been doing good work on this, and Kathy, if either of you have thoughts, ideas, how we can help people on these challenges.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, I do have some thoughts that I'd like to share, but I want to preface it by saying, this is not easy, and there's no magical solution for making all of our situations easier than they are today. So I wanted to just start with a reminder of some of the tools that we have for people to use to help to juggle the work and home dependent care responsibilities. So there are a few of them, starting with excused leave for caregiving, which I mentioned in my opening remarks. This is something that we're hoping to get authorization to continue using. That is up to 20 hours of pay period for dependent care can be charged. So, and we have a number of people using it, and I think it is very helpful. We've also offered flexible work hours in a day and flexible work days of the week. So the idea is that whatever you need to do to intermingle your personal and your work lives, let's be flexible and make that work. Another idea is to consider where you're teleworking from, if you are teleworking, especially full time. So just something to think about. Would things be easier for you if you, say, temporarily relocated to be near family members who can help? So again, this is not something that we've talked about in these forums before, although I think a few people have already done some of this. But if you're interested in that as an option, please work with your supervisor, and we will also be putting out some guidance soon on that. The big one that I wanted to talk about was actually annual leave. I know that we have mentioned this in the past, but so far, and here we are in August and the leave year ends at the end of December, early January, so far only about 2,500 employees have taken any annual leave, and we have about 17,000. So we have 1.25 million hours of use or lose annual leave that could be subject to forfeiture at the end of the leave year if we don't use it. And so I realize that using annual leave is different this year than it would in a normal year. You can't go to your favorite places. It just doesn't feel the same. However, I just want to say that for those people who have taken some leave and shared their experiences, unanimously they're saying, hey, it really helps. I really do come back feeling refreshed. I actually took a week. I was at home, staycation, and I did an online virtual, nothing to do with NASA or work. And I did some home projects and spent time with my kids and my family. So I did come back feeling better. So staycations is a great idea. Another thought for you is break up the normal work week. Start adding a few days to a weekend for a series of weekends. Even in a day, you could take time off to do volunteering or, just going outside and taking a long walk. And if you use annual leave for this, then you don't have to make up the hours later in the day if that is hard for you to do. So the only other thing I'll say about leave is that it's really important that since we're so late in the leave year, that you work with supervisors so that we coordinate across and that not everyone is trying to take leave at the same time, especially as we're getting towards the end of the year with some holiday periods. So I really I'm exhorting everybody to please take a look at leave and try to use some because it really does help. Last but really not least is this issue of workload. We have heard a persistent drumbeat of we're overwhelmed, we're under pressure, the workload is greater, and none of the deadlines are moving. So please have candid conversations with your supervisor about really, truly, what is urgent and important right now versus what could be stretched out or descoped in some way. Even little things can help. A team is a little smaller than the regular team, or I get a request, and I let the person doing the requesting know that I will be working in it, but maybe not right away. So just even little things can help to make it feel more manageable. Also, people in your work group, maybe not everybody has crunch times at the same time, so there may be more help that you can get from your colleague. So I realize that this is not the NASA way. We always say yes, and we always go at it 110%. But we also have to realize, as I said at the outset, that this is a marathon, and we are not going to get through this marathon in good shape if we don't rely on each other and look after ourselves. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
I would just add, Jane, you talked a lot about working with your supervisor. It's also important to remember a lot of the people watching this are supervisors themselves. And so please be empathetic with the people that you manage and understand that not everybody's circumstance is the same. There are people out there that have, like me, they might have a mother-in-law at home, and so they require additional help and support. They might have 3 kids that all have to start school at different times. So as a manager, please work that into your plan. How are you going to get the job done that you need to get done, and at the same time be flexible enough for the folks that you manage?
Thanks, Jim. That's such a great point. One of the reasons that we have the Friday Supervisor Series is to acknowledge the fact that supervisors are not only looking after themselves, but also their workforce. And so the series is supposed to be supportive and provide ideas and get supervisors to talk to one another. So if you haven't been to those, we really encourage it. We are also open to topics that you want to hear about. So please let me know if there are things that we're not covering that would be important to you. And finally, your HR offices are great resources. So if you run out of ideas and you need some more, your business partner, HR business partner, and your others in your HR office can certainly help. So
our next question here is, what will NASA do to help educate those employees who think COVID-19 is overblown and virtually harmless? I don't know if Dr. Polk, you want to start with that one?
Well, I think it's like all things at NASA. We educate folks on the risk and we make data-driven decisions. I don't know that we can convince folks that might have a preconceived bias. There's a lot of rhetoric out there in the press and elsewhere. Sometimes it's hard to divide the wheat and the chaff. But we're doing the best that we can at the administrative level to look at the evidence. We've got data streams that come in from CDC and HHS that are looking at everything from the testing rates to the hospitalization rates to the ICU rates. And we talk often about what that data means and where the data is going. And so it's, we don't, I don't know what I'll be able to do to quote unquote convince someone necessarily, but what we're doing, at least at the administrative level, is to do our best to protect our people and our mission simultaneously and balance that risk. And so I think we'll keep doing what we are doing right now, which is being as transparent as possible with our guidance and putting it out on NASA people. And as we see issues that require FAQs or something that might require more in-depth explanation, we try to put those out there. And so I think communication, that's your expertise, Bettina, not mine. But I think, calm has been our mantra with this.
If I could add, Dr. Polk, and you reminded me of when we were putting this plan together, which included yourself and Kathy Mangum and Steve Jurczyk and many others. We discussed that we didn't want to ping pong back and forth from being open to close, to open again. It would be more disruptive than anything we're doing today. And so we're certainly, and now my lights are going out, but we certainly, that's part of why we're staying with following the guidelines. And that's what we're going to do. And yeah, the guidelines can change, but right now I think we've got a good plan.
Thank you to all. And yes, communication is really important. That's why we have these town halls. We've mentioned a few times that we have NASApeople.gov that has a lot of information. And we're not going to be able to get to all the questions. We had well over 100 questions. We will be providing that information on NASApeople.gov and on an email. So we have a few minutes left, but want to get through a few more things. But one of the things that when Jane was talking a lot about the pressure on the workforce, I know something that leadership has done is trying to institute Quiet Fridays. It's something we haven't done yet. We're kind of soft rolling it. Steve Jurczyk, do you want to talk a little bit about what Quiet Fridays is?
Yeah, so one thing we were trying to do is think of concrete things we could do to give people some relief, right? Give them some time to unplug and some downtime and some time to catch up on work, right? Because if you looked at my calendar, you see I am in meetings a lot. And so that means if I actually have to do work, it's going to be on nights and weekends. So that is not helpful in being able to give people some time to deal with their personal lives and their families and just downtime to recharge. So some centers have already done this in several different forms, but we developed the concept of having a Quiet Friday, which we decided will be the second Friday of every pay period. NASA's open for business. We're not closed. It's a work day. However, we're asking organizations to the greatest extent possible to not schedule meetings, particularly regularly scheduled meetings, on those Fridays. So the first, we've been working through the details of how to do this with input from the centers. We've also been consulting labor to get their input and work through that, thanks to Ochiko. And so the first Quiet Friday right now, we're targeting for September 25th. So that'll be that second full pay period in September. The second Friday of the pay period is September 25th. And so right now, my calendar is relatively empty on that Friday. Another phenomenon that happens is, your Friday doesn't look very, your calendar looks pretty free on a Friday. And as the week goes on, meetings tend to get pushed into Friday, you know, and so at least one Friday every pay period, we're trying to avoid that. I look forward to being able to take that time to do work, to review things, to read things, to do the writing that I need to do, as well as take some time off potentially to get some things done, that are best done during a weekday versus a weekend. So we're gonna try this across the agency. Again, we're doing it across the agency to try to give people relief on Friday the maximum extent possible, and we'll learn as we go and adjust. And again, try to look for other ways to provide some downtime and some relief to people, so they can do a better job of balancing their work life and their personal lives.
I just wanted to add that some centers have already done something like this, not all, but quite a few, not necessarily on the same Friday of the pay period. So the idea behind the agency-wide effort to do this is to align everybody with the same Friday, so that not getting meeting calls from your center is not superseded by getting meeting calls from elsewhere in the agency. So just a note on that's sort of the change here.
Thank you. We're running towards our last few minutes. One of the questions we also had here is like, I can't 100% telework because I work in the lab. I ran out of things to do at home a long time ago during this mandatory work from home order, and do suffer mentally. Like another poster here, I beg you to let people who are willing to return back to work. I know this also is some questions just of like lab work. I'm going to put this question also in here, just to move it forward, is the moving of the stages from 3 to 4, and what does that mean? So I'll start maybe with I don't know if the administrator or Jerzyk, you want to address this, about these issues we have of like moving from different stages. What does that impact, and how does it impact work like lab work that's a little harder to do during telework?
Yeah, I'll be happy to start. So, it's I think Jim Morhard said it perfectly earlier. The goal here is to make sure that right now we're all at stage 3. All of the centers are at stage 3. Which means we're doing mission essential work, and we have an opportunity where it makes sense, we can do mission critical work. And so people are in fact going to be going back to work for those missions as we deem appropriate. And that's being driven by the associate administrators in charge of the mission directorates, based on what they see needs to be mission critical and move forward. So all that being said, we don't want to go into a situation, as the deputy said, where we're going from stage 4 to stage 3, and then we have an outbreak and we have to immediately go back to stage 4, because that's far more disruptive than otherwise. The other thing I want to address, and we keep getting these questions going back and forth, where some people are saying, how come we can't go back to work? And other people are saying, why can't we just stay home until 2021 or whatever? So these are, there's a lot of different opinions on this, and I want to be clear, and Jim mentioned this earlier as well. Everywhere there's division, we need to get rid of it. We cannot let the pandemic tear people into different areas and be upset that they're not going to work, or be upset that they are going to work. Again, we want to be accommodating for whoever you are and whatever your unique circumstances are. We want to absolutely be accommodating. We're asking supervisors to be accommodating, to be empathetic, and if you're not comfortable doing something, then don't do it. And at the same time, we're working to make sure that if there is an opportunity for people to go back to work, especially around mission critical functions, that we are giving people that opportunity. I would ask people to be very careful not to be put into a camp. This is not about whether you're for going to work or not going to work. It's about, how do we accomplish the mission of NASA? That's what we need to be thinking about all the time. So those are kind of my thoughts on it, and I'll let others address it as they see fit.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jim. I mean, definitely relying on the mission directorates and the AAs to define which missions are critical and what prioritized work we restart. On the center side, we're relying on the centers to make sure we plan that work out so that we can do it safely. Again, not only to protect people, but also to make sure we can do the mission and we're not disrupting the mission. And so they're looking at the specific activity and whether that activity can be done safely, as well as they're looking at just in general in that facility and across the center kind of population density, right? Because it's not just that single activity, it's the activities across the facility and across the center, and the center directors have, and their leadership have that viewpoint, that view of this, all the work being done at the center, and are working with the mission director. And so something might be mission critical, but it could jeopardize another important activity that's going on in that facility. So that activity might have to wait. And so it's doing both the mission critical planning as well as making sure we are not only keeping that activity, people in that activity safe, but in general, the facilities and the center safe. Also, centers are looking at opportunities to bring folks back into labs for a short period of time, if it can be done safely, gather the data, and then you can go work remotely and do the data analysis remotely. So that may be a way to manage the risk by having people come on in the labs and do the lab work for a relatively short period of time, and then spend the time to do the data analysis and whatever else needs to be done, and you can do that remotely. So I know centers are thinking about in stage 3, how to bring more work on and do it safely. And then ultimately, like Kathy mentioned, the framework and the guidelines and the data will tell us when we could go to stage 2. And in stage 2, everyone who needs to be on site to work will be on site to work. People can still telecommute if they can get that work done remotely. But when we move to stage 2, everybody that needs to get in a lab or wherever on site will be able to do that. But again, we got to use the framework, we got to use the guidelines and the data to drive that transition from stage 3 to stage 2.
Thank you so much. Good information. We have a question here. It's a little long, but basically it was a question about now that we've been in teleworking, we've been offering different movies, different efforts for people, for the workforce, but there has been some questions about if we're being inclusive of the entire workforce for the dates that we're selecting. I'll just answer this from the team in that we're looking at this information, we're examining to making sure that we are being as inclusive as possible on dates, we're going to look to make sure that we're avoiding holidays for different types of communities within the NASA family, and we'll work better. It's a learning process. Every day we're learning how to do things better. All of us are trying to figure it out, but I know that the administrator, and maybe he wants to comment, we recently announced a 5th core value of inclusion, and we want to make sure that that is reflective in everything we do as an agency.
So I'm assuming, based on how you just answered the question there, the question was focused on probably religious holidays and that kind of thing.
Yes, it was, sir. Yeah.
So yeah, so 100% we want to be inclusive. We want people to enjoy working at NASA regardless of your religious affiliation. And yeah, we want to do what's necessary to accommodate the best and the brightest that America has, and that's who NASA is.
Thank you so much. With that, we're going to wrap it up. Administrator Bridenstine, any closing remarks for this town hall that we've answered a lot of questions about COVID and things for impacting the workforce?
Yeah, I know how much good work has been going on out there. I also know that there are people that are frustrated because maybe they can't go to work. Like we heard, there's people that work in a lab and they don't have the opportunity to get access to the lab, and there's frustration there as well. But just know this, we want to be accommodating to as many people and their personal circumstances as possible. We are focused on your health and safety, number 1, and then what is mission essential, number 2, and then mission critical after that. We have, the getting back to work plan. There is a lot of flexibility in there. It is driven by the circumstances in the various regions of the country, because they're all in different circumstances. But at the end of the day, I want to just really re-emphasize how grateful we are to the NASA team. Every single person that is doing work for NASA right now is to be commended, working through some really challenging times, whether it's working at home with other family members that are also working from home, and kids that are doing school from home, and everything else. we're very grateful. We've done some really amazing things in the last few months, in the months ahead, and even in the year ahead. You know, we've got some really important things to do on behalf of the nation, and in fact, leading the world. And so, I would just ask everybody to keep it up. Again, if you have a personal circumstance, talk to your supervisor. If you are a supervisor, please make sure that you are accommodating to the people who work for you. This is a pandemic. It's something that we haven't experienced before in my lifetime, not at this level anyway. And we want to make sure that we're doing the right things by all of the NASA employees. So I appreciate everybody for participating today.
And thank you, Administrator, and thank you to all for joining us. Reinforce what the Administrator said. Really appreciate everybody. I know that I've been doing this with my 2 kids and construction happening in the house. So it is, you never know what's going to happen. But I thank everyone participating. Thank everyone for submitting their questions. You can get more information about all this information on nasapeople.nasa.gov. And as we mentioned, we'll be sending an email to the workforce with additional details and answering as many questions as possible. Thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day.